close it up. Maybe that has something to do with it. My other iPads, plural, you know, about 30 seconds get to where they'll work because they're being fed power, but not this one. Okay. Thank you, Shane.
You're quite welcome.
Y'all look kind of cute in there together too, Shane.
That's what I said.
You're gonna need a little stand by the end of the meeting to hold it.
I just keep switching hands. Switch sides.
There you go.
So how does it show, Shane? Are you and I like in a single picture?
Yeah.
Oh, good. That's what I mean when I say togetherness.
It's the one way you can be within 6 feet of each other right now.
And close together at the same time.
I'm gonna try again.
Ashley, show the mayor your mask.
Oh, look, y'all. It's about to work.
Well, y'all seeing Ashley? I don't have him.
You see him right there? He needs a cowboy hat.
I don't see him. I got the others.
He could hold up the Dollar General and a cowboy hat.
I have one of those that's orange.
So now I've got 4:00 p.m. It is 4:00 on July 20th, 2020. And this meeting of the Conway City Council is officially open. If Madam Clerk, you would do a roll call to the council just to assure that we have a quorum.
Yes, Mayor, you are there. Miss Timms?
Yes.
Mr. Hubbard?
Yes.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. White?
He's here.
Mr. Goldfinch?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Here.
Mr. Hyman?
Here.
That's all accounted for.
Thank you so much. We do have a quorum. And Madam Clerk, have we satisfied the requirements of the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, we have.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. I believe I'm live now. We will now have an invocation by Dustin Ventura of Grand Strand Baptist Church.
If you would pray with me. Dear Lord, we thank you on behalf of our whole community, Lord, that you've allowed us to be able to connect virtually in this way and stay protected. Lord, you provide mercy to our families as this virus has not been as bad as first reported. Lord, we're thankful that you've given us health and the ability to be involved in such useful work, even during these difficult and trying times. Lord, you've charged each of our good leaders to promote peace and order and justice. And so I ask for each of the leaders here represented, Lord, that they would have the fear of God that would lead to wisdom, the confidence to do what is right, and the ability to work with respect and kindness with one another, even though they may disagree at times. And lastly, Lord, the children and the families, often not a primary focus. Lord, I ask that the decisions that we work on and that we see orchestrated, Lord, that they would be guided by how it will affect the least of these living in our community. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. We will first entertain a motion relative to approving the agenda. Is there a motion?
Mayor?
Yes, please.
I
Mr.
move
White,
that
is
we-
that you?
Yes, it is. Thank you. I move that we approve the agenda.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second? Mr. Hyman?
Second.
We have a properly seconded motion to approve the agenda as it is set forth. All in favor with a show of hands, please. I believe that is unanimous. Thank you so much. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda and its approval. Is there a motion? Mr. Hubbard? Ms. Timms?
I make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Mr. Hubbard?
I believe he seconded it, Mayor.
I'm sorry?
He
I
didn't.
did second. I did second.
All right, there's some interruption. I'm sorry. I couldn't tell. Thank you so much. So with that properly seconded motion, all in favor with a show of hands, please. And I believe that also is
That is
unanimous.
unanimous, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Next on the agenda is item 5, a special presentation or a few special presentations. A is a discussion of outdoor dining and sidewalk cafes that will be presented by Ms. Hyman.
Yes, Madam Mayor and Council, this is a discussion, as you may have noticed, in recent months, we've seen a lot more of the sidewalk cafes and outdoor dining in Conway. We actually allow them as a conditional use in some of our zoning districts. And we also allow parklets, which you may remember, we amended the ordinance a couple of years ago to allow these as well. The outdoor dining ordinance allows alcohol consumption with certain conditions. However, sidewalk cafes don't allow alcohol consumption at all. Like I said, we've seen a lot of this recently. Here are some photos that were taken recently of some of the outdoor dining we've seen downtown to help with the social distancing requirements. With this, staff has realized that there are even more opportunities for outdoor dining that utilizes public property. And during the state of this emergency, staff has worked with business owners to make the outdoor dining work. And I guess what we're asking for you now, asking of council now, is if you would like to consider this as a continued use, something to move forward with. If so, the city needs a mechanism for permitting. This process could include technical review committee review, insurance requirements, and some other requirements that we have similar to the parklet. So what we wanted to bring this to council's attention to see if this is something that council sees us continuing into the future. And if so, if you'd like staff to move forward with drafting a permitting process and bringing it back to you for review.
If I hear you correctly, Ms. Hyman, you would first like a general statement from the council relative to our interest, after which time you would prepare actual recommendations for the implementation of the program. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will hear from any council member who'd like to speak on that matter.
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. White and then Ms. Timms.
Okay, I think this is a good gesture for the businesses of Conway that we do allow this, and with some more, I guess, thinking about how it would look long-term until we have some kind of dates of something, as well as the alcohol consumption during this time period. Is that going to be a part of this or not?
And that would be up
In those.
if that's something you would want us to include.
Mhm.
Right. Well, and my understanding, Mr. White, is that if we say to our staff that generally council is interested in pursuing a continuation or even a growth of outdoor dining, they would then prepare all those pieces and come to us with some recommendations.
That's correct.
Yes, thank you.
Ms. Timms?
I think the additions that restaurants have made have been a charming addition to downtown. I have a little issue with places where a young child might dart into the road and there's no physical barrier between the seating and the road nearby. But I think that might be something we might look at. But other than that, I think it's a good addition. And it's about the only way through it for restaurants.
Thank you, Ms. Timms. Mr. Goldfinch.
Hi, everyone. I would submit that I'm generally in favor of it. I think there's some things that we've got to figure out. The picture that we have before us, of course, is the outdoor seating adjacent to the trestle, which I think has been wonderful for them folks to use during this time. The question of, who owns that property, who has the right to use that property, comes into question if this is something that we continue longer term. I'm hopeful that we can figure something out. I like outdoor seating, maybe not this afternoon, but in the shoulder seasons particularly where it's comfortable and in the morning time. But I just think this would be a great workshop conversation.
Thank you. Anyone else to make comments? I don't see another hand. Am I missing anybody? If I might just add, I certainly see it as a critical piece of the continued success of some of our restaurants under current conditions. And it is an opportunity that has been brought before the council several times before, one that is amenable to a lot of people in lots of situations. When it comes to property ownership, I'd like for staff to speak specifically to alleys and roadways that may belong to the city, so that we are in the best possible position to consider those. But otherwise, that would be between the owner and the business owner and the rightful property owner. I think they could work out their details. Ms. Hyman, do you think, would it take a vote? Could we say generally, I'll tell you what, I'll move that we ask our staff to pursue the issue of continued and expanded outdoor dining so that council can consider it further. Is there a second?
Madam Mayor, this is a special presentation. No motions are necessary. These are
Okay,
not.
all right. Well, in that case, I think the comments made by the council then are such that staff would be aware that there is general interest in moving forward. Item B is the discussion of proposed amendments to development and maintenance standards. Ms. Hyman.
Yes, and as you may all remember, for several months, we've been talking about residential design standards. From that discussion, Planning Commission reviewed, we talked to council about it in previous meetings, and you may all remember we did the online survey. And from that, it went back to Planning Commission, and Planning Commission actually created a committee to review this. But during this process, staff realized that a lot of the recommendations that staff had brought forward, some were design related, but some were really just development and maintenance standards, meaning they were things that we'd all always done a certain way, but didn't necessarily have it written in the ordinance, or things that needed to be cleaned up. This bookkeeping type standards. So we've broken it into two different categories. So the first group I'm going to go through is the development and maintenance standards, which is the bookkeeping. It's not the changing of design standards for developers. It's just a cleanup. So I will, as quickly as possible, go through the proposed amendments. One of these being, historically, we had individual mailboxes at single-family residences. In recent years, the United States Post Office changed this requirement, and in new subdivisions, cluster mailbox units are required. Here's some photos. You can see what those look like. However, our ordinance didn't address this, and it's something that we wanted to make sure developers up front were taken into account when they were designing their subdivision, and it wasn't something that was haphazardly thrown in at the last minute. So we have added definitions for these different units, depending on the size. And again, this also went through the committee, the Planning Commission, as well as the Residential Design and Standards Committee. So everything we're bringing forward to you has been vetted and discussed at length with the committee and Planning Commission. We've also added some definitions for homeowners association and property owners association, which was something that was missing in our ordinance before. Requirements for these cluster box units. I won't go through these in depth. If you have specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. But basically, it just lays out design requirements to help with the safety of the individuals that will be using these mailbox units in the neighborhoods. And it's very similar to what's required in Horry County as well. So you can see on the left, this was a subdivision that the standards changed after the design had already been approved. And so they were installed, but it's not ADA compliant and wouldn't be approvable for our new proposed standards. The photos on the right show something that would meet the proposed standards. For the areas that would have more than 16 units, we would want a centralized location for that, which you can see in these photos as well. Another thing that staff has run into some problems with, and I have Jessica Hucks on the line too, as our planner, and if you have specific questions, I know she deals with these issues a lot and can answer them. But the red shows some of our proposed new language, which is a little more specific on what fence materials required. We've run into some issues with folks wanting to use different types of materials, and we've received a lot of complaints on it. And also we've added language that allows staff to monitor when someone's not taking care of their fence like they should, if it's in a dilapidated state. Another issue that we've added a definition for spike fences. We've run into issues where neighbors weren't getting along, and one neighbor would put up a fence with a tarp just for spite. So we've added language in that as well to give staff the ability to monitor that. One thing that we've seen with our zoning board of appeals is when you have utility substations that require chain link fencing around it, they will have to request a variance because our overlays wouldn't allow it. So we are proposing to add an exception for that, so that if you had a utility substation, you wouldn't have to request a variance because it's something that's needed. This is when we have residential subdivisions. A lot of times we have required a lot of our newer developments a landscape buffer when you have double frontage. This would allow, if you can imagine right down the street, you see a new subdivision. We really would prefer to have a berm or landscaped area along that road or fence so that it's consistent. So it gives that break from that road to the back of those lots. So this just clears up that language a little bit to give staff a little more meat when they are reviewing plans for this. We have a lot of issues with residential subdivision with street trees and who maintains them and for how long. So we've added some language to clear that up so that it would be maintained by the homeowner or the HOA. A lot of times people think that the city should be in charge of those street trees, and that's not the case. So we wanted to make that clear in the ordinance. Again, we added some more language for the HOA and or property owners association for what their requirements are once a subdivision is turned over, just to clear the city of anyone saying that the city's in charge of those requirements. We've added a little more language, and again, this is just cleanup type stuff. I'll try not to bore you with all of it. Allowing most of the ordinances, the planning director reviews all the certain plans. This gives other planning staff the power to review plats and subdivision plans and other reviews. And that's the same with this. And we've added a little more language, given some more specifics on what is required for plats. And this, again, this goes back to the double frontage lots. It's just clean up. To go back to the HOA, as you all know, when we have a new subdivision, we require open space, detention ponds, landscape areas. We just want to make it very clear that all that an HOA must be set up to maintain those areas. It doesn't fall back on the city. Same street name
Ms.
sign.
Hammond,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, you're fine.
But I think the certainty that a homeowners association is established is something that we can control. But what we cannot control is that they remain active. I've seen it happen more than
we
once.
do. Right.
So I don't know that there's ever, I don't know that there's a good solution to that issue.
And I would agree with you. And we have run into that quite a bit. And it is something that we make sure before we approve that final plat, we make sure that the HOA documents are in place and that it is being set up, and we try to stay on top of it. But you're correct. A lot of times they do fall to the wayside. However, we're hoping with some of this language, making it very clear that they are in charge of the open space and the stormwater ponds and the landscape buffers, that they'll remain in place to take care of those areas. Because a lot of times, unfortunately, folks think it's the responsibility of the city when that's just not the case. And that is, I know that was a lot. That was just the development and maintenance standards. And again, if you have specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. But that was mostly just the cleanup, things that staff has noticed through the years that we knew needed to be addressed, needed more teeth, needed to be a little cleaner. And does anyone have any questions for me on any?
Yes, I have one.
Sure.
On fences.
Yes.
Did you have anything, or is there anything in there about how close the fence can be to the edge of the sidewalk? There are a couple of houses that have sidewalks right up to the edge of their property line, if I can use that word. And then if you're driving up to the, on a corner lot, if you would, and you're driving up to the highway, you have to edge out further into the highway to see. Do we have control over how far that fence can be?
We have height requirement. The fence is allowed to extend to the property line, but there are certain height requirements. And on a corner, there are certain height requirements for that. If they go higher, which could cause visibility issue, they are required to be set back. So that is something that we do have in the ordinance now. But if you can think of a specific instance that there's an issue, we'd be happy to look at that to make sure they received a permit and met the requirements.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Here, Catherine.
Anyone else?
Let's go back and talk about street trees just a minute.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I'm a little bit confused because I don't know in most subdivisions whether they have a sidewalk that sits back from the street or not, but sometimes these trees are in the city right away, not on the person's property. Although they usually cut the grass and maintain around them, do they have permission to do whatever they want with them?
They're supposed to be in place, obviously, when it's developed. A lot of times they do. A lot of times they take care of them. And I've seen covenants and restrictions sometimes that will leave the maintenance up to the homeowners, and some give it to the HOA. So you see a little bit of both. But a lot of times, especially with these newer subdivisions, if they are dead or dying, they call the city and think the city should replace them. And that's not something that the city does. So we just want to make sure when we're reviewing those HOA documents that it does address this, and we make sure that either the homeowner or the property owner association does that and doesn't call us asking the city to replace it.
Thank you.
Mr. Hubbard?
Yeah, Mary Kath, I got a couple of questions. One was just about what Ms. Timms just asked. Do people still have to get permits if they're trimming these trees, or?
If they're protected trees, they would have to, which means be a certain species and a certain size.
All right, now, when we decided on the fencing with dilapidated estates,
yes,
is that subjective, or do we have any criteria what defines dilapidated?
Trying to find where that was. Uh, we just say post support board panels that are considered to be in a dilapidated state shall be repaired or replaced as reasonably required. And again, that goes back to a lot of times what our staff is dealing with. But we have seen where they're falling into a sidewalk or falling into a road, and we just didn't have anything in our language to write a letter to a homeowner or send a ticket. So this would give staff that ability to look at each one, and it will be, some of it will be subjective, but it will at least give staff the power to write a letter if we do see a problem with the fence.
Okay, and thirdly, on the subdivisions that have built the city standards and turned them over to the city, are they still gonna be responsible for street signs?
For the signs, yes.
Even if it's on the city street?
Yes. I'm
Okay.
trying to find where that is.
If I might comment on Mr. Hubbard's question, the language as determined by city staff is probably a good add-on when it comes to those items that need further definition or that tend to be subjective. That would allow the city staff to determine. If city staff says it's dilapidated, then it is.
Right. We can add that language.
Mayor, can I interject real quick?
Yes, sir, Mr. Emery.
To address Shane's question there a moment ago, when we have a developer come in and build a new subdivision with new streets and all that, they pay for the first round of street signs. They pay for the street names, they pay for the stop signs, they pay for all that. What this addresses is that they want to upgrade those from the typical channel signs to something fancier. For instance, in the Forest Glen subdivision, when that subdivision was first created, they used fancy wooden posts, fancy wooden signs, and all of that. Those signs and they paid for it, but those signs lasted about 3 years and started falling apart, and the city had to pay to replace them. And where we are, what this says is if you want to upgrade to something different, then you have to pay for the replacement of that when we have to replace, if the city has to replace it. Otherwise, you have to maintain it.
Good answer. Thank you, Adam. I was referring to somebody ran over the street.
If they run over a stop sign and it's our street, we replace it. If
Thank
it's not an upgraded sign.
Anyone else? I don't see any hands. Am I missing anybody? Well, we'll go on then to item C, the residential standards, proposed amendments to residential standards, also Ms. Hyman.
Yes, and again, this is out. This is the actual design standards, proposed design standards. And like I said before, this went to Planning Commission, went to a committee that was composed of a lot of builders in the area. We met 4 or 5 different times trying to come up with compromise and some ideas on some of these design standards. And then it went back to Planning Commission for approval. And I will try to go through this as quickly as possible. The first was a discussion on how the houses are situated with garages and carports. So what Planning Commission, after comment from the committee, Planning Commission's proposed language is that all newly constructed garages and carports shall have a mix of orientations within the development. This could be attached. Garages, carports be 3 feet behind the primary structure, side load, or flush. This was in hopes to diminish that look of all the garages being exactly the same down the street. The idea is to try to break it up some. So not to say you couldn't have the front loaded garages, which was something in the original draft, but to require a mix to try to break up that cookie cutter look in some subdivisions. The next, and you may remember, the first draft that we had was to not allow vinyl at all. After going to the committee and planning commission, the proposed language is that single family developments would permit brick, fiber cement, hardy flake stone, or a combination of any of these materials. And when you have vinyl siding, you have to use at least 2 types of materials or a combination of different types of vinyl, which could be beaded, Dutch lap, or architectural, which is board and batten, on the front facade. So again, the hope there was to break up that vinyl, not to say you couldn't do vinyl at all, but to give a little bit of variety on the front facade with that vinyl, which we've seen in some subdivisions. And if you'll need to stop me at any time or have questions, please.
Mayor Catherine, William here.
Sure.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
On that last point of using on vinyl siding, I had a question about this. You know, when you talk about 2 types of materials, I mean, are we talking about, can you elaborate on the vinyl as it relates to that?
Sure. A lot of times you'll see vinyl has different profiles. So it could be the regular horizontal profile that you see, or it could be the Dutch lap. So the combination could be just in the eaves, you have a little bit of that Dutch lap, and then you have the horizontal somewhere else, or you have the board and batten. So it's required. I think what the planning commission and the committee wanted to get away from was, you see the homes when it's just the horizontal vinyl siding and there's no variation. So this was another compromise, not to say you couldn't do vinyl at all, but just to try to dress it up a little bit, give it a little more architectural flair than just the basic horizontal vinyl siding.
It can be 2 cheap types of vinyl siding, just not the same vinyl siding. It would have to be a different design.
Yes.
So it can all be cheap vinyl siding. You're proposing a breakup in design.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Ms. Hyman.
I think Ms. Timms?
Ms. Timms, thank you.
I'm a little on William's side here. I feel like we need to be really careful with this vinyl siding because this is a stretch from the past as it is. And that seems to be very loosely defined, just 2 different types. I can imagine what some of these choices might become. I don't know how you fix that, but I'm a little leery of just leaving it up to the builder.
And I will say this is probably the most heated conversation and in the meetings. There was a lot of back and forth, and it is a little more watered down than the no vinyl siding at all. But it is a difficult thing to regulate, to make it look good, unfortunately. So I completely understand your concerns, and I have them as well. But this was
once we open the door to that, I don't know how you close it.
The door to allowing
multiple uses of vinyl sidings.
Right. Our total use of vinyl sidings.
I mean, we're allowing it now. It was just that the original proposed language was to not allow it any longer.
There was also some discussion about, and I'm a vinyl siding expert, so I'll lean on someone else for that. But there's discussion about if we were going to allow vinyl, but nicer vinyl. I don't know what nicer vinyl is called. I'll just nicer vinyl and cheaper vinyl. Is there a way to look at it or approach it from that angle? And
that was discussed with the committee as well. And the language does say high quality beaded Dutch lap or architectural vinyl. So that is addressed in this. But again, it's it's a regulation thing. It will be difficult for staff to, I don't know how we would say whether it's expensive or not expensive, or whether that would work or not. So it does say high quality beaded Dutch lap or architectural, which from my understanding is more expensive than the standard horizontal vinyl siding that we normally see.
Are you saying, Ms. Hyman, that that's unidentifiable to the naked eye? That whatever that Dutch higher quality?
No, ma'am, not the different types, but whether you would have an expensive Dutch lap versus an inexpensive Dutch lap, that may be difficult to.
I see.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes.
So the hope was by requiring this combination of materials and labeling it as beaded and Dutch lap and board and batten, that those were higher quality than just the standard horizontal.
Any other comments?
Ben, if you have anything else to add, because I know you worked at length on this.
I just wanted to point out that in one of our subdivisions, which is a planned district, there is a requirement that the siding is a minimum of 3 mils thick. And it was on the planning department to inspect that siding. And once the siding is up, the only way to determine the thickness of the siding is to find a joint, stick your finger in it and feel it. And I don't know what 3 mils feels like. Does anyone know what 3 mils feels like? It's 3 mils, 2 mils, 1 mil. I mean, it's such a small thing to figure out. It's almost impossible to enforce it in that way. If it was easy, we probably would have already implemented it. But there's just not an easy way to differentiate between inexpensive vinyl and a high quality vinyl, which I think is why it does recommend here high quality beaded Dutch lap or architectural vinyl, which is the language that the builders recommended to us to include. I think it's just going to be incumbent upon us to make sure that it's required and not suggested that they be the high quality materials.
Right, and this is something that staff, when they were looking at the building permit, that they would make sure that it was included before they would issue the permit.
Once it's up, it's going to cause a lot of hard feelings if we have to make people take it down.
Right.
Sure. Unless we're very clear about what our requirements are. I mean, we would only come to know they're not having complied with the regs if there was some report made, for example.
When we went to see, yeah, when we went for the final CO, we may find it at that point if it didn't match the plans, and before we would give them the CO, we would make them change it.
Mr. Goldfinch.
According to the American Society of Testing and Materials, they require vinyl siding to be spot 0.35 inches thick, but the most durable vinyl panels are at least spot 0.4 inches thick. So there you go.
Right. That sounds real decipherable out in the field as well. Any further comments before we move on? Go ahead, Ms. Hyman.
Thank you. This was a simple one. No one seemed to have any heartburn over this. It's a proposed language that a sidewalk be installed connecting the front door to the street front sidewalk or a driveway. And that was something else that came out of that visual preference survey that was completed. Another proposal is that there be a minimum overhang eave of 12 inches on all sides of new single family construction. And again, this was one that we didn't receive any pushback from the building community. They seem to like this one and agree with it. The next is proposed language for diversity in the blocks. Again, this is to help get away from the cookie cutter neighborhoods. And it is to require no same building elevation or mirrored building elevation on either side nor across the street from itself. So this is something that the planning department would have to work with the builders up front to make sure you wouldn't have the same building in a row. It would just give a little diversity. The original proposal that we took to the committee was a little heftier, but this was something that again was a compromise. The original was that you couldn't have it every 4, but after working with the committee, this was changed to you just couldn't have them side by side or across the street. Again, this is just to help with that diversity, because that is something that was a concern in these blocks. The next is, and this actually was something that staff did not propose, but the committee did, was that if you new residential construction use architectural shingles instead of 3-type shingles, which is just a nicer, more expensive shingle. But it's a small thing that can make a big difference. Again, this is for townhouses, and this would be to allow vinyl siding to match the single family residential. This was discussed previously also to delete the language. We have language in our multifamily districts that every lot, you have to have 6,000 square foot minimum area for every first unit in a multifamily development, and then 2,500 square foot for each additional. This is something staff has brought forward to remove that and just let the density be dictated by the height requirement, the setbacks, the open space, the parking. Let that determine where that density would come from. And this was something that the building community and planning commission had no issues with. Our open space ordinance now addresses single family residential, but it doesn't specify clearly what needs to be done with multifamily. So this is something that we wanted to clear up, just to make sure that when we are reviewing these plans, we're consistent with what open space we require in multifamily development. So again, this is another bookkeeping item. This is another for multifamily, is that when you have a building with road frontage, the building shall be forward of any parking structure and have to face the street front, and that you have to have sidewalks connecting everything within the development. Again, this is just clean up to make sure everything is consistent. The multifamily residential also has these design standards in place, making sure you have certain combination of materials also. They deleted, this is again some cleanup, and I apologize. We put everything in here because we wanted to make sure you had everything. Another proposed language that came out of planning commission was that if there are 150 or more lots, the TRC committee may require additional traffic calming measures, which could be more stop signs, yellow lines, speed humps, traffic circles, because a lot of times we run into issues with this down the road. So it's something we want to give TRC the power to require those up front so that we don't see an issue for police down the road. I know city council has seen this time and time again where neighborhoods come forward with concerns about traffic calming. And this just gives staff a little more teeth for that. We had language, we had definition for pathways in our ordinance, but we didn't specify where it was needed. So this is just adding language saying that you have to require pathways to connect open space. This, to go back to the street tree conversation we had before, and we've gone round and around and around on this. And I know my first couple of weeks at the city, Kevin Chestnut hit me up about this and said we needed to do something about it immediately. And it's taken a little time, but we're finally there. One issue that we've run into is, and if you can imagine, a lot of times in these new single family developments, the street trees are required, and they've been installed in that tiny little strip between the sidewalk and the road. And if it's an oak tree or any other type of tree, over time it grows and the root system tears up the sidewalks, and it's become an issue. So with that, after numerous discussions with our public works department, with our arborist, and then with this committee, we wanted to be very specific about where those street trees should go. So this is saying that the required street trees shall be planted within 3 feet of the house side of the sidewalk, and not in that little tiny strip, because that just becomes a maintenance nightmare for the city down the road. So this is just specifying where those need to go because we get that question a lot. And this is just clearing that up in another section of the ordinance. As you know, a lot of our larger developments, we have a lot of people from the community come forward concerned about traffic. A lot of times we will ask them to do a full traffic study, even though there was nothing in our ordinance for that. So this is giving staff the power to require a full traffic study on the larger developments. Again, a lot of this is just, we know something needs to be done, but if we tell a developer they need to do it, a lot of times they'll say, well, where in the ordinance does it say I have to do that? So we just want that language in there to give staff that power to ask for it when we know that it's needed. And I know y'all remember this from some of our larger rezoning requests lately. Traffic studies are definitely needed. Sidewalks, this is something else. We just want to make sure, a lot of times with developments, when they're phased, you have a stub, like say you're building out phase 1 and phase 2 isn't built yet. And you have a stub to it. We just want to make sure the sidewalks are continued to that. Because a lot what we've seen is when phase 2 comes in, then those sidewalks don't connect. So this is just something to make sure that those sidewalks will connect later. A lot of this language that we have in here is because of problems we've run into in other developments. Again, this goes back to the street tree. And again, this is one that we had a problem in another development. And it's just saying that water and sewer lines shall be extended to the property line of the development. Again, so this is, so you don't have problems when the next guy, the adjacent parcel needs to connect, that there's not a gap in that. And from what I understand, we've had an issue with that on a previous development. I know that was a lot, so please ask any questions you may have. I think that's it for me right now.
Thank you, Ms. Hyman. Are there questions or comments? There seem to be none. I have one question or comment, I'm not sure which. It has to do with the diversity in housing styles. One of the things that I've learned through staff, Adam specifically, is how to avoid pockets of lower valued housing and other pockets of greater valued housing by a different kind of diversity, by there being some diversity in size and affordability within a development. Is that something that you considered?
It's not something that was discussed because we don't, or ordinance doesn't have minimum house size or maximum house size requirements. So that is not something that we discussed. Adam,
All right.
I know you've got something you want to say.
And Mayor, one thing we could do, and it's not included in this because this was just for the design standard.
Right.
We could look at incentivizing affordable housing as a component of new subdivisions. What we've seen in other places is if you commit to 10% of a subdivision being affordable by HUD standards, then you can get a density bonus or lot size reduction or things like that. That's certainly something that we could consider as we continue to increase in value in the city and grow as a city. As of right now, we don't have a defined affordability problem with our housing, but it's something that we definitely need to monitor because at some point we may get to that point where our houses are no longer affordable for our police force or our fire department or our public utilities department. And at that point, we need to start looking. Before that point, we need to start looking at how we prevent that from happening.
Right,
So,
because whether or not we have that issue, repeatedly developers come to us proposing just the very kinds of developments that we've seen historically fall to waste all too fast. And it is incentivizing that I'm talking about, not forcing it, but making certain that in the future we look at ways to try to encourage developers to include various sizes and costs for the homes they're in. Ms. Timms?
Another way that you can encourage a developer to alter a whole subdivision is not to use the same material on mirrored houses. In other words, one might be brick, one might be wood or whatever. I mean, but I'm just saying if you could mix it makes it more like a traditional neighborhood when you don't have all the houses out of a particular facade. I think it
Yeah, I
doesn't
completely agree.
always be that way, but it's helpful.
And we can clean that up, but I completely agree with that.
I think, was somebody else trying to speak? I guess not. Mr. Goldfinch.
Mayor, thank you. I would, of course, I agree with what Ms. Timms just said. And, the difference, of course, is that we're catering to a community that builds as an industry. I mean, that used to didn't be the case around here. You had a neighborhood and, you would build a house the way you like it. I would come along and buy a lot and build it the way I like it, and someone else and so forth. And that's not the case. So it just makes it that's much more challenging to do it.
Anyone else? Ms. Hyman, we really appreciate the information that you brought forward. But you're still on. Item D is a review of permitted uses in all zoning districts.
And I guess with those two different items I just brought before you, do you want them to come back to council as first readings or bring revisions back that we've discussed? You tell me how you'd like us to move forward.
Well, if you incorporate the comments that have been made by the council relative to any additional information that you might attach, I get the sense that we're about ready to bring it before council for first reading. Does anybody think differently? No? All right, so yes, ma'am. I think that's where we are.
I appreciate it.
Anything you can come up with to distinguish the vinyl siding would be helpful.
Yeah, that was a tough one. Like I said, it was a very heated discussion at a lot of meetings. Okay.
Yes.
It's all right. The next, and again, this is a complicated one, and I don't know that we need to go through each zoning district tonight. Adam and I discussed this earlier today, and it may be better if council wants to look through each zoning district and then call me or reach out to me separately. But I know we've had discussions in the past about what uses are allowed in each different zoning district. And the way that our ordinance is set up now, we have use tables that would list a certain use and then show you which zoning district it was allowed. But we didn't have a page that said highway commercial with all the uses below it. So staff has taken the time to do that so that if you look at it, you can look at it per zoning district to see what uses are allowed. And that is included in your packet. But I know there's been some concerns about why is this use allowed here? Why is this one not allowed in this area? So this is just something we wanted to bring forward to council to see how you wanted to move forward with this. If this was something you wanted to look at in more depth, it's a lot to take on. I don't know that it's, I don't know that you want me to go through each zoning district uses. As you can see, it's quite lengthy. Adam, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think if we went through this tonight or to this afternoon, it's going to be overwhelming.
It is.
But perhaps, Mary Catherine, you go through just a couple of them just to kind of introduce it to them so they know what they're looking at. And you can see that it kind of explains the difference between permitted conditional and permitted as accessory and what that means and start from there.
Right. In your packet, we have a page like this for each of the different zoning districts in the city. And as an example, this is residential agricultural. The permitted uses mean they're allowed, no questions asked. And you can see the different uses that are allowed in the RA zoning district as permitted. Conditional means that it's allowed, however, there are certain conditions you need to meet. Let's say if you, one thing that's listed is a home-based occupation. So with that, if someone came to planning staff and said, hey, my parcel's zoned RA, I want to do a home-based occupation, is that allowed? We could say, yes, it's conditional use. However, we need to look at the home-based occupation portion of the ordinance that gives specific requirements, which in this case would be you couldn't have customers come to the home. It couldn't look like a business from outside. There's certain conditions attached to it before it's allowed. Permitted as an accessory means that you could have a boat dock there, but it couldn't be the only thing you had. You'd have to have a home or a recreational facility or something else as a permitted use, and then you could have this as an accessory to that principal use. So as you're looking through each district, you can see what's allowed and what has conditions and what is only as accessory. Did that clarify it enough? This is another example, low density residential. You can see the permitted, conditional, and permitted as accessory. But again, this is included in your packet. It's all the residential districts, commercial, every district that we have. And as you can see, some of these have quite a few uses that are allowed.
And of course, I would think, Ms. Hyman, for any of these all-inclusive lists, that there might be other things that just haven't been considered.
That's correct, and that's why, you know, when you have a zoning ordinance, it's a living document. It's constantly changing because there are things you didn't have before that you have to take into account. So we realize that it's something you can't foresee everything that's going to happen or what's going to come forward. So that's why we see amendments.
Yes, ma'am. Any questions?
Go through all these? I mean, is that something? It's a lot, and I don't want to overwhelm you. I see some shaking heads. So I know this has been requested to do this at some point, but again, if we can sort of narrow down what council's concerns are, and then maybe have that second meeting to go through what some of those are, that might help with our being able to adjust and be able to answer questions. There's just, as you can see, there's just so many uses that are permitted or accessory or conditional that, you know, for us to be able to anticipate your questions in this meeting might be a little bit hard to do. So if you've got, you know, if you want to look at these between meetings or we'll put it on a future agenda and we'll bring it up then, that would be how we would like to game plan this as staff.
I think what you provided is a Bible that speaks to what exists now. And I think it's relatively comprehensive in the sense that it talks about what's sort of automatically allowed, what's permitted, and what's conditional. And what usually happens is when a use is requested that doesn't fit or doesn't fit the definition just yet, that we have issues with it, or that, you know, we have to reconsider those kinds of things. Perhaps I would just ask the council to keep this list, and if there are questions enough, if you have questions of staff, if we bring those to Adam's attention, and if there are enough of them at any given time for us to study them just for consideration or through a workshop, then it'd be more concise than to sort of look at the breadth of them at one time. Ms. Timms?
Mary Catherine, I think this format is very helpful. It's easy to look from one to the other and see whether it's permitted or whether it isn't. So thank you for doing this. I know it took a lot of time.
Planning staff did a lot of it. It was a team effort, and we've already used it. I had someone reach out to me last week and told me what their parcel was zoned and asked what they could do on that parcel. And it was really nice to be able to just send this rather than the entire use table. So I think it's something staff will be able to use moving forward.
And that's essentially what I was trying to say, Ms. Hyman. It's a really good tool. So for everybody who was involved, I thank them all. Let's move ahead then to item E, a discussion of the celebration of lights. Mr. Emmerich.
As you know, we have ran the celebration of lights as city staff for the last, I think, 5 years. I think this would be our 5th year, maybe our 6th year even. And the one thing that we've had as a concern from the get-go is the amount of staff time that it takes to get the celebration of lights up and running and then operated. And we've had several years of declining revenues in the celebration of lights, but at the same time, we want to be able to bring something like this to the residents of the city of Conway. This is actually a suggestion from Ms. Timms to look at a private company that might be interested in running the celebration of lights for us. And so Ashley Smith, our recreation director, has been working with a private company in discussions with them anyway, to talk about the Christmas light celebration, or the Christmas celebration of lights, and what they would want to see if they wanted to run it, and how it would work as a partnership. And we're not quite ready to speak in any specifics tonight, but I wanted to introduce the idea to you just to make sure there wasn't any heartburn with it. What they would like to do, and what we're in tentative talks to do, and this will have to come back to council for approval, is both a Halloween and a Christmas drive-through light event, which would end at Riverfront Park. Both would end at Riverfront Park. The Halloween one, where it ends, where there would be a haunted house of sorts with multiple walkthrough areas for different levels of scary, for family-friendly ones versus scary ones. But in all of the talks, what the people we're working with are very cognizant of the fact that Conway is different than other places. We are, we pride ourselves on the sort of nostalgic Rockwellian look for our Christmas, especially, and what we're looking for the city. So they're taking that to heart, and they really seem to get what we were looking for. So they're crunching numbers right now, and I hope to be able to come back to you at the next meeting with a recommendation from staff on a partnership with this group. But I wanted to make sure you weren't going to have any concerns, because part of what they're asking for is not only to be able to use the same route for the celebration of lights, to use it for the month of October for the Halloween event, and then also to close Riverfront Park at dusk each night for the event, where they could sell tickets or sell portions of the event on that site. It would be open during the day, allowed for everybody to walk through, but at nighttime it would be closed for their event. That's sort of the big ask. They are aware that we have a tendency to flood in the fall, although this year we will not. And there are some other things that we've talked to them about, that are questions that we have for them that we've not gotten answers for yet. But again, I wanted to bring it to your attention that we're in this conversation to see if you had any concerns that we could address before we come back to you. And Madam Mayor, I see Ms. Timms' hands up.
Okay, Ms. Timms, please.
I think this is the right way
Yes,
for
ma'am.
us to go if we can work out some sort of arrangement with the company, because I do feel like that our people are stretched to the max with everything that we throw at them at one time. I would ask that we consider at least the drive-through portion of it to remain at a level that all of our children can afford to go through.
That is one of the conversations we've had, is what price point do they have to make it worthwhile, and how low can we keep that?
Well, I don't think they have to, the same car that drives through doesn't have to stay for the night event, and perhaps they can, beef up their portion of it there. I don't know. I just want this to be a service for our children as much as anything else.
Certainly.
Mr. Hubbard?
I think one of the issues we've had in the past is it interrupting the events at the Shrine Club. If they could design the route where people could still get into Shrine Club and back out. I mean, just closing for the Christmas season is one thing, but now we're talking about closing for the whole fall and And Christmas.
Certainly. And that was something we have struggled with making sure that we're able to get people in and out of the Shrine Club. We'll make sure that's part of the discussions as well.
Thank you.
And question also, Larry, is
Mr. White?
that we can possibly just do Christmas this year and roll into October next year?
We can have that conversation. I think their bread and butter is more the Halloween side.
Mhm.
So that it might have to be a package deal to make it worthwhile for them, but we'll find that out.
Understood. Thank you.
Well, if we work out some of the kinks, those things that are troubling to us, that would just be another opportunity this Halloween time to get people to come into Conway and possibly spend some money in local businesses while they're here.
And that is something that they have expressed, that they would like the downtown businesses to participate in their event and make it more that Conway is a destination for the month of October, November, and December. So they would like the businesses to be able to capitalize on their presence. So that again, they said the right things to us, which made us pretty pleased. And Ashley, I know that you're on. Is there anything I left off that you feel like should have been included?
No, you covered everything. I really think the Halloween Christmas combo would be good for the city. Last year, we only brought in $30,000. Each year we've been losing money. And this is a company that this is what they do. They will use our lights. They will also bring more lights to the table, and they will make Riverfront Park, it'll be majestic. It'll be special. What they do is first class all the way. Mr. White, I know that we had some concerns about the parking and going in October, or Mr. Hubbard, but I really think that with the route they have, we'll park where the old Fireman's Clubhouse was. Also, we've talked to Matt Bonador at the marina. We'll use his parking lot, and I think it'll be a win-win for everybody. And even if we can incorporate the Shriners Club with that, I think it'll be a big time win for the Conway citizens.
At the point that we feel ready to move forward, we would, what do we have a sense of what length contract that we would sign with them?
That's something that we are still.
Yeah.
It would not be year to year. They would want more than 1 year to commit to.
Of course.
And certainly we can understand that. There are some unknowns about things at the riverfront area that we still have to sort out. So a multi-year event might have some unknowns and challenges that we need to address. We'll just figure that out. We'll have that hopefully before we come back to you.
All right, Ms. Timms?
While we're thinking about Halloween and Christmas, we about maxed out with our Christmas tree lighting at City Hall last year. I mean, they were wall to wall in the street. I don't know how we're going to manage that with the virus going on. But we need to think about that too.
The Christmas tree lighting will need to move. It was unsafe last year with the number of people we had in that small area. And I think we've actually discussed it with council, is moving it over to the lot where the police station once was. How we are able to do a Christmas tree lighting this year with COVID is still a mystery. And, we will have a Christmas tree, but the Christmas tree lighting event might look different this year than other years. So we're still playing it by ear.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Goldfinch has his hand up, Mayor.
Mr. Goldfinch, thank you.
I just want to be clear for anybody on the call or watching this. And you said at the very end, Adam, you said, look, we're going to play it by ear, because that is 5 months. I mean, there's a good chance we'll have a vaccine in 4 months. So let's play it by ear. Thank you for adding that. I had already raised my hand though. Thank you.
Well, we'll know closer to time.
Mr. Smith has
Any other comments?
Yeah, and I wanted to be clear about this. This is a situation to where we should make money on this. This should be something that, I want to make a price point to where all the kids in Conway can afford to go. But also, we've been losing money the last 3 years with this light show. And the only way for a recreation department to grow a light show like this, like James Island or North Myrtle Beach or the other ones, is to partner with somebody that's going to take it to the next level. And I think this will be a destination spot, if not year one, but definitely after year two. And I want to thank my staff, Caitlin Tiller, Special Events Program Coordinator, who's been the lead on this and has done a great job getting this done.
Thank you so much, Ashley.
One more thing, Mayor, to kind of express something I've told council before is, in order for us to be able to pull off celebration of lights and get downtown decorated and put up all the lights and the light poles and the wreaths on the bridge, we need to start in September. And in September, we're still mowing grass. So it's become almost an insurmountable burden. So we definitely need to have some sort of change to how we've done this in the past. And this might be the best win-win for the city and for staff. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well said. Unless there are other comments or questions, we'll move forward with public input, item 6. This is now done remotely and reported to the city clerk. Ms. Tessier, is there any public input?
Yes, ma'am. We have 2. Both of them are about the mask ordinance. The first one is from Bonnie Lewis, and I had spoken with her the other day, so part of her email is talking to me about that. But thank you for speaking with me this morning regarding the City of Conway face mask ordinance. Our confirmation confirmed to me the many loopholes in the ordinance, which leaves the decision up to the individual entities. You confirmed that non-essential businesses are not required to use face masks when within their facilities. That it is perfectly acceptable for the employees at the Trestle Bakery to take and fill my order and receive my money without any safeguards in place to protect my health and welfare. No mask, no plexiglass barrier, even while I was wearing a mask to protect their health and welfare. I realized I had an option to turn around and leave, but I chose to risk my life for a donut. This one time, I will not do it again. I am forced to determine on my own whether or not a business may be considered non-essential and therefore not required to protect their clientele. At one point, non-essential meant not open for business. If a person's religion, politics, or health precludes them from wearing a mask, then that person needs to stay at home. It is difficult for me to wear a mask. That is why I do not leave my house except under the most pressing obligations. Then I get in and out as expeditiously as possible while wearing a mask, as everyone I know is doing. Until everyone understands these new social obligations, we will continue to spread the virus. This is why we need clear and consistent guidance from our elected officials. Non-essential should mean closed for business. When I first read the guidelines in the Sun News, I took it to mean if you pass through a doorway into any enclosure, wear a mask. It should be that simple. No excuses, no provisions, no question. If you can't wear a mask when you pass through a doorway, then you don't get to pass. And you should expect to be met with people already inside taking the same precaution. The second one is from Barb Eisenhart. We have a major crisis on our hands and we need a very stringent mask mandate or we will end up in a lockdown. Requirements for kids to wear masks should be 2 years and older. Even Disney requires kids over 2 be masked. While a mask might be inconvenient, it is much less inconvenient than being intubated on a ventilator. Please make our mask ordinance more stringent. Also, if kids will be likely to be required to wear masks in school and potentially daycare and camps, it is prudent that we get used to them now. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tessier. We'll move forward now to item 7, items for consideration. The first of which is consideration of an amendment to emergency ordinance number 2020-0706, requiring face coverings or masks to be worn in public in the city of Conway during the COVID-19 public health emergency and recovery. Mr. Emmerich.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. Since we last met 2 weeks ago, we've had an outpouring of opinions on both sides of the issue on masks. One council person asked me last week, what is the CDC saying? What is DHEC saying on how to prevent COVID from spreading? What are they saying that we can do? And the answer is 3 things: social distancing, washing your hands, and wearing a mask. Those are the 3 things they're saying. we cannot require any of those things without there being some sort of ordinance to do so. We have followed the social distancing requirements that the governor has set forth. Those have been relaxed and relaxed and relaxed. I wash my hands constantly. I've got 2 bottles of hand sanitizer on my desk right now, and mentioning it now, I need to do it. So, but the mask thing is become the new thing that everybody's doing, and it seems to be working to some extent. So, Mary Catherine, I know you're controlling the PowerPoint tonight. Let me show you some of the facts. And let me say this, I did pretty good in statistics in college, so I know that correlation does not equal causation. But there is a correlation between when mask ordinances were enacted in Horry County and some of the more recent statistics. Mary Catherine, could you advance to the next slide? This is the weekly totals for the state of South Carolina. We've been tracking this since the very beginning. You can see that it's steadily gone up, and it's gone up pretty drastically in the last month. Last week, we hit a peak of 13,345. We will continue that trend as this week progresses. I remember when there was an average of a very low number and we were worried about it. And now we're at an average of 3,937. That's for the entire duration, that average. Mary Catherine, can you go to the next slide? This is the daily average for the last month. And if you go, and you can kind of see the peak there in the middle, that peak coincides with when the mask mandate started coming into place. Mary Catherine, will you go to the next slide? So the North Myrtle Beach mandate started on the 2nd of July. Horry County followed on the 3rd. We followed on the 6th. So we had a peak of 300 plus on the 3rd. And you can see it remained steady for a week or so, and now it's starting to fall off. Whether that's because of the masks or not, we don't know. But what we do know is that masks aren't hurting the number. They aren't. So if washing your hands doesn't hurt and social distancing doesn't hurt and masks don't hurt, all they can do is help, and all the experts are telling us they help. That is why this is on the agenda to be reconsidered. What the ordinance that is before you tonight does is amend the ordinance that was approved 2 weeks ago. The 2 week ago amendment, or the 2 week ago ordinance, was to require masks be worn in those businesses that are essential. And the thought behind that was, if you have to go to these places, you have to go to the grocery store, you have to go to the drugstore, you have to go to get gas, you should be safe while you're doing so. And so you don't really have a choice but to go to these places. So we required a mask to be worn there to eliminate the risk of transmission for places that you had to go, or to reduce the risk of transmission for those places you had to go. But what we're asking and what is proposed tonight is that you consider expanding that. And what the expansion does is it is the model ordinance from the Municipal Association that requires a mask to be worn in all retail establishments, which includes grocery stores, convenience stores, any other establishment that sells non-prepared food. It includes the stores that sell any retail goods, including sporting goods, furniture, home furnishings, clothing, shoes, clothing accessories, jewelry, luggage, department stores, hardware, home improvement stores, books, crafts, music stores, florists, flower stores, and other stores that sell supplies for household consumption or use, pharmacies, places that sell medication or medical supplies, places that sell alcoholic beverages, including alcoholic beverages stores, laundromats. It also includes food service establishments, including restaurants. This covers virtually all retail and restaurant uses. There are exceptions. Number one, outdoor spaces or unenclosed areas are exempt, so you don't have to worry about wearing a mask while you're running at the park or playing tennis or playing soccer. For religious beliefs that prevent you from being able to wear a mask based on your religious beliefs. If you have a medical condition or a behavioral condition that the face covering would exacerbate under the guidance of your medical doctor, you don't have to wear one. It also has an exemption carved out for children under the age of, and that age can be provided by you, or we can go with what was approved prior, which I believe was age 8. And for those under the age of whatever age we set, we should encourage reasonable effort. And this ordinance requires reasonable efforts for children under that age to wear a mask. You don't have to wear a mask when you're in a private individual office, such as I am right now. You don't have to wear a mask when you're complying with the direction of a law enforcement officer, or in a setting where it's not practical or feasible to wear a mask, such as a dental appointment or while you're swimming. And if you're in a place where you're exclusively with members of your own family or household, you don't need to wear a mask. So those are the exemptions that are fairly routine. The penalty for violating the ordinance is $25 for a normal person. If you are a business and your employees are not wearing a mask, it is a penalty of $100. And each day of a violation can be considered a separate violation. So you could, in theory, get a $100 ticket on consecutive days. And there are it sort of goes on if you are a business and you continually violate this ordinance, we could revoke your business license or your certificate of occupancy or declare you a public nuisance. But hopefully we don't get to that point. And I think I got Chief Long on the call with us. To my knowledge, we have not written a single ticket on the ordinance we've had in place for the last 2 weeks. And yet compliance is extremely better than what it was before. Chief Long, would you like to speak to that?
That's correct. It is all complaint driven. We're getting calls from places and usually by the time we get there, they've already left. Most people aren't being confrontational about it, waiting for us to get there. And when we do show up and people don't have them on, it's just a little casual conversation. And most people are, I guess, at least in their presence, willing to accommodate it. So it has not been anything overwhelming, even with the number of calls. But we're monitoring on a case-by-case basis and using a lot of discretion and a lot of tact in trying to talk to people and encourage them to do the right thing.
And to back up again for our purposes, for the city purposes, we are seeing between 2 and 5 positive cases in city employees a week. That's manageable, but if it becomes those 2 or 5 individuals in one department, it won't be. So we've been lucky so far that usually when we have a positive or a family member that is positive and we have to quarantine someone, we've done it over a spread of departments. But if we have 5 people out this week and 5 people out next week, both all in the fire department, we're gonna have a hard time fighting a fire. So if wearing a mask prevents my guys from getting sick and your house from burning down, in our opinion, it's worth it. So that's our presentation, Mayor. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take it.
Thank you, Mr. Emmerich and Chief Long. We really appreciate that report. Before we bring this to a vote, now would be a real good time for us to hear comments from the members of the council, from those who wish to speak, if there be any. Mr. Hyman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just be brief. I was one of the people last week that voted for the essential business only, and the problems I've seen and that have kind of made me lean more towards this ordinance as we've got is that I saw on 2 different occasions people with masks get ridiculed by people who didn't have masks, and it was in essential businesses, and that to me was pretty sickening. And if the people that did that are listening, I hope they're ashamed of themselves. But the truth of the matter is I did go to a couple restaurants last week, and some of our local restaurants, the employees were wearing masks. I had on a mask. I felt very safe. But if an ordinance like this is what we need to make everybody actually start abiding by it, maybe that's what we need to do.
Thank you. Mr. Goldfinch.
Thank you, Mayor. Adam, the only thing that, and I've read through this twice now, so I may have missed it, but I don't think so, is it says all customers are required to wear face coverings while inside the enclosed area of any retail establishment or service establishment, which I agree with now. The exception of if they're in a food service establishment seated at a table, it would make sense that once they're seated at that table, they could remove their mask while they're seated at the table and being served. Is that fair to assume?
Yeah, that's certainly the intent of the ordinance, and we can add that phrase to, you're right, it is not in there. So we'll add that phrase to this. Certainly that the intent is for you to, once you get at your seat, you should be able to remove your mask. Otherwise you can't participate in the reason you're there.
That's right. Can't consume food with a mask.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
And that would, I think that would further stem the issue of you can still operate a bar that sort of operates as a restaurant in a seated capacity to prevent the, shoulder to shoulder environment that undoubtedly is spreading, this situation.
Mr. Hubbard? Mr. Hubbard, unmute yourself, please.
Yes, question for Chief Long. He and I were having a conversation and he mentioned people calling 911. Is that what you recommend for people to do, Chief?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Wanted to make that clear.
Thank you for making that clear. Anyone else, please? Ms. Timms.
Well, I just wanted to thank council, the members of this council, for taking another look at the recent mask ordinance that we passed last week. I think no one wants to wear a mask, but I'm weary of the cry that we are infringing on people's rights if we make them wear a mask. Social distancing seems not to exist if you look at the crowds on Facebook and other places, at the beaches and the rivers and the bars. And if this continues, we're going to put ourselves right back in a stay-at-home mandate and risk our economy once more, which I don't want to do. But I particularly believe in the strength of this community. We're Conway strong, and if we all come together and follow guidelines for just a few weeks, we could turn this thing around, at least here in Conway. And this council needs to be the leaders. We must take the strongest possible stand against this virus. We must demand that everyone wear a mask in public, that we stay home whenever possible, and we focus on caring for other people instead of just ourselves. Doctors and nurses are overloaded, and teachers and children have no idea what their future will be. All of Conway needs a month or more of each of us making a supreme effort to curb this virus. We've already lost 2 weeks by not supporting a stronger mask ordinance earlier, but it's never too late to do the right thing. And I think this is a chance where life has given us a second chance, and that doesn't happen very often. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Timms. Mr. Goldfinch.
Mayor, I was just going to make a motion if I may.
Before you do,
Sure.
Mr. Goldfinch and Madam Mayor, we need to know the dates that this will be effective from, assuming it today or tomorrow is the date start. We had the former ending of the ordinance to be August 4th, which is the date after our next meeting. If we want to continue that, that would only be a 2-week period for the ordinance. If we want to extend it longer, that was something that council would need to consider. And also the minimum age by which a mask needs to be worn, if that needs to stay at 8 or we want to change that. I'm sorry to interrupt the motion. Just want to make sure that that's considered.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Goldfinch, go ahead. please.
Mayor, I move that we implement said ordinance effective immediately. I would ask that we keep the age at 8 years old and that we run this out for another month so that, or at least to be reviewed on August the 17th, which is our meeting, 2 meetings from now. And then we can reassess what, what's going on and what we need to do from there.
And
Mr. Goldfinch, go ahead. May I just say something first? I just wanted to ask Mr. Goldfinch if he would consider the 18th, if our meeting is on the 17th, just to not let it technically end before we have a chance to.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant. I was looking at the calendar on the 17th, yeah, 18th, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mr. Emmerich, please.
Might your motion also include that language about the food service establishment. What I've written is number 2.4, section 2, number 4. In a food service establishment, once seated at a table, face coverings may be removed until dining is concluded. Would that be inclusive in your motion?
It would, and I would just like to add too, I spent the last 3 days down in Charleston and my wife and I for our anniversary, and 100% compliance. You walked into a restaurant, you had your mask on, you sat down, you took it off. It wasn't a big deal. You walk into a store, you put your mask on. It almost got sort of normal after a little bit. But yeah, that it's just like I told a waitress the other night at one of my favorite spots on 3rd Avenue when I was picking up to-go food, and she was sort of giving me a hard time about the mask ordinance. And I said, we've got to do this so you can stay open. I don't want you to have to close down again. And I think this is doing the right thing. And I think we need to do this.
I didn't get a chance to comment, Ms. Timms, if you would allow me to. I certainly agree with what you said earlier, that leadership needs to act timely and not be delayed. And 2 weeks later is better than later still, or not happening at all. I'm very pleased that the council members who heretofore were opposed to a full mask ordinance have given more thought to it. And I'm saying that with the assumption that there's now a majority. Before there's a second, I would like for our council to consider, the only thing that I have real angst with is the age. If we can only do it after age 8, that's one thing, but children are being taught responsibility as they grow. And if a requirement in our world is, in order for you to go to Walmart, in order for you to go to this place or that, is that you wear a mask, that responsibility is a good lesson to be taught, certainly at a time like now. We're talking about a major health risk, and we've got thousands of people who are 8 years old and younger. It seems to me that it's just a good tool for parents to use when they decide when their children can accompany them and when they cannot, when they need to stay with another parent at home or in the car. If they can't wear a mask, I don't know if anybody agrees with me on that term. I will certainly leave it alone if I'm standing out there by myself, but I just need to say that 8 years old covers an awful lot of people, and children who are much younger have learned to comply with other rules. They know well in advance of being 8 years old not to run out in the street. They learn other rules. I think this one can be a learned behavior as well. Ms. Timms, I see your hand.
I couldn't agree more, Mayor. I also would like to respond on behalf of teachers that may be teaching these 5-year-olds and 6 and 7-year-olds if they ever get to go back to school in a classroom setting. Please do not let the first day that they go back to school be the first day that they put on a mask. They have enough to deal with just getting them to do what their regular routine is, but they need to be prepared for this. So I don't have anybody that I have to ride herd on to get a mask on them and make them keep it on. So I'm not going to be bent out of shape either way about it, but I do think it cannot be up to the teachers to raise the children. The parents have to help.
Thank you, ma'am. So I'd offer a substitute motion, just reducing the age of the mask wearing mandate to the age of 5. Anybody 5 and above, if there is a second.
I'll second, Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
Mayor, point of order. I don't know that there was ever an opportunity for a second on
second. Okay, all right. There may not have been, and I wasn't trying to unearth a very good motion put on by Mr. Goldfinch. Is there first a second to Mr. Goldfinch's motion? There is. Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, I'll second Mr. Goldfinch's motion.
All right. So from this point, Mr. Emmerich, does Mr. Goldfinch's motion have to fail before we consider the difference in the age?
Mr. Graves is on the line. I'm going to leave that one up to him. I think we
Okay,
have to
thank you.
consider Mr. Goldfinch's first.
Okay,
Which means we
so
vote.
Guys, this is William here. I don't want to get, I don't want this to be the headline. It's about to turn into be. I mean, if it needs to be 5 or 6, I threw out 8 because it was already there. It's been put out by the American Society of Pediatrics that it's rare for these little kids to spread it. I don't want this to turn into a contest. And so if it needs to be 5, it can be 5 or 6. Or pick your number. It's difficult for these little kids to keep them on. I've seen that with my smallest one and others. So I don't want this to be the headline that it's about to turn into be. I mean, this is to pass a comprehensive, inclusive mask ordinance in Conway.
Right, but I agree with you, Mr. Goldfinch, but this is also our opportunity to think about all the considerations at once. I'm not turning it into an argument. It's just, I think this is an important piece of what we do. So are you willing to amend your motion to make it required of 5-year-olds? Mr. Goldfinch.
Sorry, somebody was knocking on my office door. I'm sorry. I'm
Okay.
back.
Well, what I explained was that I didn't see this as an argumentative point, but one that has some substance. Are you willing to amend your motion to make it required of all people at the age of 5 or more or older?
That's fine.
Thank you, sir. So Mr. Jordan, you've seconded Mr. Goldfinch's motion. Would you also second his motion with the revision made?
Yes, ma'am, I certainly will. I'll second that motion.
Thank you, sir. Now we have a firm and seconded motion. All in favor, please indicate with a show of hands. I have a yes from Ms. Timms, a yes from Mr. White, from Mr. Hyman, Mr. Goldfinch, Mr. Jordan, Mr. Hubbard, and yours truly, which makes it unanimous. Thank you all so much. Finally, well, not finally, but we will now hear the city administrator's report.
Thank you all. Wanted to first give you a quick update on the COVID relief program. As you remember, that is the program that we are funding to help businesses affected by the coronavirus. As of this morning, we have 31 total applicants who have submitted an application, 17 of which we are waiting on attachments. Actually, 20 of which we're waiting on attachments that we've not yet received. That's the documentation to ascertain whether they qualify or not. We've had 3 that did not qualify, 2 of which did not live in the city, and the third is a business that is already closed. And we have 8 applicants that are ready for underwriting. So we've got 8 that we're ready to give some money to. Those businesses that have not yet submitted their paperwork or have submitted incomplete paperwork, we're working with them right now to get the necessary documents in. Ideally, we'd like to award all the extended funds by the next meeting to get the help to those that need it as quickly as possible. But there is still money left in the program. So if any of you know of any businesses that are interested, one of the concerns that we've heard is that this is just a way to get information from the businesses to be able to audit their hospitality fees or their accommodations tax or their gross revenues. We at the city staff is not seeing any of the documentation that's coming in. It is going directly to our consultants, and they do not have any access to any of those other things for the city. So there is a level of separation. So if there are businesses watching that are concerned with that happening, please do not be. This is a program that we are trying to help you, and we are not checking notes on this one to make sure that everything else is in order. As long as you are in compliance with what we know, you're good to go on this one. So please don't let that, please don't think that we're a big brother looking over your shoulder. Next, I'd like to give you an update on the 4th Avenue wiring conversion. As of this morning, and I think I've got a picture of it, HTC has begun removing the overhead wiring on 4th Avenue. It doesn't look like much in this picture, but this was taken this morning while those wires were coming down. It was very exciting for us to see. We believe that Santee Cooper's wires should be next. I know they've been working on it very diligently to get everything underground. Probably before you see the wires from Santee Cooper come down, you'll see the pedestrian lights go up, because those have to be lit to be able to take the place of the ones that are overhead. So that would be a good reason when you see those going up to be excited, because it's getting closer. We are still working toward the resurfacing of 4th Avenue. We know that is the one thing that everybody is really concerned about. The good news is, the longer it is delayed, the more everything underground has a chance to settle, and all the dips and ruts that might result will be lessened because of it. So if there is a silver lining to the condition of 4th Avenue, it will mean that the final road is in much better shape for longer because of the delay. So if I have to turn it, that's what I'm doing. All right. Periodically, I get housing updates from Zillow, and I wanted to share some of the highlights from the one that came most recently to me with you guys. Now Zillow has some interesting terminology, so I'll give you some caveats there. According to Zillow, our typical home value is currently $183,000 and $668. $183,668. That is up by 4.2% from 1 year ago, when the typical was $174,689. So I'm not sure what typical means, if that means average or mean, or if there's another mathematical term to it, but typical for our purposes, we're going to take it as some sort of average. Also, there are a lot of homes on the market currently. There are 734. However, 41 of those homes have sold recently. Now, I don't know what recently means, but let's assume it means monthly, which means that 6% of the available housing stock sold in the last month. And that seems to be a pretty healthy number. We know that it is a still fairly hot housing market, and we know that a lot of people are moving here every month because of everything that we offer. So that's very good news. And not using Zillow stats here, but from me, our number of new homes constructed continues to rise. However, we are nearing the end of our available lots in many of our expanding subdivisions. So, if there's one thing that 2007 through 2012 taught our development community, it's not to overextend and overdevelop raw land. It's not to turn the dirt too soon. So we may have a period of time when there is a lack of new homes being constructed simply because there aren't not enough lots to construct upon. That will likely affect our permitting revenues. However, that same period should also see an increase in the home values, because demand should exceed supply. So if there's a silver lining to take away from our housing market, that even when we run out of buildable lots, those houses that are sitting here that have been for sale or that might come for sale should sell for more. So want to show you something else. We tried to clean some of our 2-hour parking signs last week. Some of them are not cleanable. Some of them are losing the vinyl decals. And so if you look at the current 2-hour parking signs, they're using a font that is dated. They don't meet our city brand. So we had Braxton Fleming make up a mock-up of a new sign. It uses, you can see it, get out of the glare. It uses our font, our color scheme, and our logo. So if council chooses, we can put these signs up to replace those 2-hour signs that we have now. And if you'll forgive the technology here, let me show you what the current ones look like, and I'll do it back and forth.
Mr. Emmerich, I'm not seeing either. I just see the wiring coming down.
Hold on 1 minute. Oh, I was holding it up. You have to look at your camera.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
See, I can only see so many of you at a time.
This
Okay.
is what our current signs look like. And I realize it's in reverse because we're on Zoom. But that's what the current signs look like. It's just a vinyl font. And this
Actually, it's not in reverse.
Oh, it isn't good. It's in reverse
Yeah.
on mine. And I got a light overhead. So can you see that okay? Is there a glare?
Yes.
And so that would be the ones that replace it. Again, we're using the city font, the city logo, and the city color scheme to replace those. And we can do these in-house.
Mr. Emmerich, may I make a comment?
Of course.
It just seems like the bigger message is that it's 2-hour parking. Would it make sense for that to be in the darker color?
We could. The only reason we
And-
did it, and that is reflective, so it might show up better in different
I s-
lighting.
I
And
see.
the color that was used, and we could do green, again, was green.
Right.
There's, look
And,
at that.
I'd just like to see it both ways.
Okay,
It seems not so much for evening hours, but during the day, that the green would be clearer.
We can
I
do
don't know
that.
that to be true. I'd like to see both, please.
Absolutely. We'll have that done for the next meeting. Okay. The next thing on the list, Mary Catherine, if you'll jump ahead. Since this pandemic has started, we've been focusing hard at city staff on getting our jobs done. And we've sort of missed out on some of the pomp and circumstance that we do with council meetings. We've not celebrated longevity. We've not celebrated the employees of the month. And the longevity one, we've continued to award the longevity bonuses without bringing our folks in. The employees of the month, it's just been very difficult to be able to manage getting those to you in a format that makes any sense. But we continuously see things like this that I wanted to kind of hail good customer service. This is a photo today of Gavin in our building department, 100-degree heat, climbing underneath a customer's vehicle to help him change a tire. And yes, he was masked the entire time. So I didn't want to let this opportunity pass. So if you see Gavin from our building department, please congratulate him for exceeding what is expected of our employees and really going the extra length there. And then finally, we've been working hard at Collins Park for the last couple of weeks. We always work hard at Collins Park, but we've really put the effort in the last couple of weeks. Timmy Williams' crews have been out there very heavily to clean up and weed and prune the meditation garden. It had been neglected for a while, and it now is back to its glory where it should be. When we put the basketball hoops back together after the quarantine, after the social distancing limitations were lifted, they leveled and straightened and put new rims and hoops on the basketball courts. Ashley Smith's crews, and go ahead, Mary Catherine, you can go to that picture. Ashley Smith's crews today put up windscreen on the 16th Avenue side of Collins Park so that it can block some of the wind that comes through for the tennis. And again, we used our branding font and colors, close to the color scheme we could get in this format on the tennis center. Also this week, last week, they also put new landscaping around the Collins Park sign, and they hope this week to be able to put landscaping around the Welcome to Conway mural that was added a few months ago. One thing that we plan to do next is a master plan for Collins Park, for the Recreation Center, for Sherwood Park, and for all of our other parks to be able to kind of direct growth and direct the improvements with your assistance and with the community's assistance to make sure that we're adequately addressing those things that should be in the parks already that we haven't been putting in, and be able to kind of tie everything together. So I want to be able to bring you in a short amount of time some really great ideas for our public places and be able to meet the needs of our community as we continue to grow. So that's my report. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Emmerich. Are there questions or comments to Mr. Emmerich's report? There seem to be none. So we'll move forward with council input, and I will direct the names based on the visual that I see. Mr. Hubbard, you're up first. You need to unmute, please.
I got it. Okay, yeah, just real quick. I was very vocal on the mask ordinance. I want everybody to know why. I had a couple of things I had a problem with. One was that the language looked as though employees would have to enforce the mask ordinance on customers. I think that's probably putting some people in physical danger. The other was, and not a lesser one, is how it would affect our police department. So I talked to Chief Long at length, and he seems to have a pretty good handle on it. And so those two problems I had were dispelled. So Adam, thank you for clearing up the language in the ordinance. And if one person doesn't get sick or one person doesn't die, I think we've done the right thing here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hubbard. Mr. Jordan, you're next.
I'll kind of echo Mr. Hubbard and say, thanks for getting this back out there. I don't think any of us were opposed to a mask ordinance. We just had some questions there, but glad to see it back up. Glad to see it move forward. This thing is not going away quickly, and we need it to. I'm seeing it every day. It's a nasty virus, and whatever we can do to kind of curb the outbreak that we're seeing here, I'm all about. So I'm happy to support that and glad that we've got that in place at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Mr. White. Unmute, please.
I'm trying. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. And I too want to thank all of you for your vote today, this evening. Evening. And just know that we're trying to do the best that we can for all the citizens of Conway. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hyman.
Thank you, Mayor. My sentiments pretty much echo what everyone else has said. My biggest concern is obviously safety, but also I think Ms. Timms said it earlier that we don't want another shutdown. And I know Mr. Goldfinch said it as well. And that's certainly not what I want either. Businesses need to be open. People need to be working. I'm glad we were able to all come together on this. I think it'll certainly be beneficial. And as Mr. Hubbard said, if it saves one life, then we've done the right thing. Also, I'm super excited to hear about what has been brought to us with Adam and Ashley. I think that could be a great thing for the city. As a council member with 2 children, I know that's something that they would really enjoy. But other than that, everybody stay safe and have a good rest of the week.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Goldfinch.
I don't have anything. I just wish everybody a successful and safe week, and look forward to seeing everybody soon.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Timms.
On a different note, I'm very pleased to see that the perimeter wall at Lakeside Cemetery is going up, and it's going to be very attractive. I believe it looks good so far. Of course, it's just begun, but they have a ways to go, but it's very nice addition to that. And I just think that it's never too late for all of us to come together and do the right thing. And I'm just really appreciative of that fact, and hope all of you will stay safe and your families as well.
Thank you, ma'am. And I'll be brief as well. I was particularly interested in a notion that came from Mr. Jordan some weeks ago, something that we might have discussed further when we were in retreat, which ended up being postponed for good reason. And that has to do with making either some statement, some movement, some action, or just a designation of a philosophy that speaks to the racial unrest in our nation and in our community these days. I don't think it's going anywhere, and I think it would still behoove us to think about how we might say to our residents and to people who visit here who we are and what we believe. All of us received a letter from the Spiritual Assembly of Baha'is, and there are just a few sentences here that I think sum it up well. And I'm quoting from that letter: "To create a just society begins with recognition of the fundamental truth that humanity is one. But it is not enough simply to believe this in our hearts. It creates the moral imperative to act and to view all aspects of our personal, social, and institutional lives through the lens of justice. It implies a reordering of our society more profound than anything we've yet achieved. And it requires the participation of Americans of every race and background, for it is only through such inclusive participation that new moral and social directions can emerge." I've asked Adam, Mr. Emmerich, to add to our next agenda, just a discussion relative to how the city of Conway might approach this issue in our lives. That he might do it through just a discussion. It may need to come through a workshop. I just don't want us to leave it at bay. I believe that the forces are still alive and well, and the sooner that we as an entity make our philosophies known, the better. So hopefully we'll see more of that really soon. I want to thank those members of our council who, after further consideration, did support a more comprehensive mask wearing mandate. I believe that it is going to help us to reduce the number of new cases, hospitalizations, deaths in our area. I believe that it will support the continuation of everything that we hold dear when it comes to commerce in our area, and that it will add to the opportunity for our teachers and students to return to school in the fall. Thank you for your follow-up thinking. It's never, I believe Gene Tim said this, it's never too late to do the right thing. I just hope we haven't lost anybody in the interim. I will now entertain a motion for us to go into executive session. We will have a discussion of negotiations incident to a proposed purchase of property adjacent to Crabtree Canal based on section 3470 AC, after which time we will reconvene from executive session, possibly take action on matters discussed in executive session, and adjourn after that time. Is there a motion?
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. White.
I move that we go into executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan.
Second Mr. White's motion.
We have a properly seconded motion to go into executive session at this time. All in favor, please show your hand. All right, and that is unanimous. We will now go into executive session. Yes, please.
I don't really like these Zoom executive sessions to begin with, but I'm not home alone, so I'm going to tap out, so I'll be in compliance.
You
I
can
see.
close your door, Mr. Hubbard, or will that
I
not work?
don't have a door to close. I mean, I'm set up right here in my wife's temporary office, and